The 2000s was a wacky time for the automobile. We had weird cars like the Chrysler PT Cruiser, the Pontiac Aztek, the Isuzu Via-Cross, Honda Element, and of course Toyota had to join in the mix with their offshoot brand Scion for young people. This little toaster right next to me is the one that started it all for Scion, the XB. So today I wanted to get up close and personal with Toyota's little bread box, the Scion XB, and we'll also see why these have such a cult following. Shall we? So welcome to the first Scion on the channel. This is a special day, especially being the breadwinner of the Scion lineup. For those that don't know, Scion was introduced in March of 2002 at the New York International Auto Show. Scion originally introduced two concept cars at the New York show in '02, the BBX, which turned out to be the XB, and also the CCX that turned out to be the TC. In 2004, Toyota was ready to launch the production models of the Scion brand, starting at the XA, which was a small hatchback, and of course the XB. The XB and XA were only sold in one trim level, but with an abundance of dealer accessories for young people to customize. The first gen XB, such as this one, is based on Toyota's Yaris and Echo of the early 2000s. These were also sold in the Japanese market as the Toyota BB. The only main differences were this one being left-hand drive, the BB is right-hand drive, the badges were also different, and the XB used a standard 1.5 liter four-cylinder from the Yaris and Echo, while the BB used smaller engine options for Japan. To my surprise, the Japanese-focused Toyota BB was actually available with four-wheel drive, unlike the XB, which is only available as front-wheel drive. Also, of course, Toyota marketed these towards young people, but a lot of elderly and senior drivers seem to be enjoying these as well. So it's a car for all ages. Now this little guy in particular belongs to my friend Karna. It's a 2004 Scion XB in Thundercloud Gray. It's a very common color for Toyota back in the day. You could find these on the 3rd gen 4Runner, the IS300. This was one of the prime colors for Toyota back in the day. However, I would personally find myself an orange or a solar yellow XB if I was gonna buy one. And actually, shout out to the guy in my area with the yellow Scion XB and alloy wheels. It looks very good. The MSRP of an '04 XB like this one was just about $14,000, and really the only options that you could choose were between the automatic transmission, that was an $800 option, or the free manual transmission. This one is the automatic. I don't know if many of you may remember, but when these were new, these were actually sold at Toyota dealerships, marketed as Toyota Scion. Scion never actually had their own line of dealerships, so you could only buy these next to a Corolla. Toyota offered two special accessories for the XB and also the XA to make them more sporty and aggressive for the young people. You could either choose a $225 strut tower brace or a $335 cold air intake. But again, these were only available in one model or one configuration, just like this XB right here. But if you're cross-shopping all these other little weird SUV or hatchback things, there's not much out there, and there wasn't that much out there back then. Like I said again, Honda Element, the Chevy HHR, the Chrysler PT Cruiser was out about this time, but there really wasn't much out there at the time that was this boxy. This was in a league of its own. Let's not get too excited though, because remember, this thing is a boxed up Toyota Echo. It's not a bad thing though, because it's reliable and very cheap to run. So we can now talk about that prime powertrain and listen to the early Scion beep. Now I present to you what is not so much of a powerhouse, but it is very economical. Welcome to the 1NZ FE, a 1.5 liter dual overhead cam inline 4. It's a very tried and true little engine, as it's the same one that you'll find in the Echo and some other smaller Toyota products at the time, but in this case it makes 105 horsepower and 108 pound-feet of torque. Of course, those numbers do not sound like much, but this thing is 2,400 pounds, so it gets it to 60 miles an hour in just under 10 seconds and gives it a quarter-mile time of just over 18 seconds. So it is not fast, but this is very economical. Toyota rates this engine at 30 in the city, 34 on the highway, and a combined rating of about 33 as well. Those numbers are very accurate for this unaerodynamic looking, aerodynamic fuel sipper of a car. You should definitely see over 30 mpg, because there really isn't much reason to be hitting the gas all the way down. Lastly, of course, the XB is only front-wheel drive, and you could choose between a 4-speed automatic like this one or a 5-speed manual. Scion was very conservative for all their models, not even just the XB. Pretty much all of these got a standard 15-inch steel wheel. You'll rarely see some with alloys, and those are 15s as well. But Scion actually offered 3 different versions of hubcap for the first gen XB. This one is rocking the version 3 hubcaps, but Karna actually has all 3 versions of the XB hubcap to interchange. Now, I know looks can be deceiving, and they are in this case, but to an extent. Don't expect the interior volume of a Sienna for something that's this small. It is still very practical though, and there's only one way to get into the trunk. You have to make sure that the doors are unlocked, of course, and this rear glass does not pop open in this situation, but there's a really handy button that opens the long tailgate for this very nicely as well. Thankfully, because this is a box, you can fit many things vertically in the trunk of this. But if you want maximum hauling capability in your XB, you can fold the second row seat down. That's a 60-40 split, and get up to 43 cubic feet of volume. It's funny though, that's the size of the trunks of some big SUVs nowadays. You'll probably notice that the floor in this is a little bit higher than you would expect. That's because on the right side, there's this little storage compartment underneath the floor. On the left side, that's actually where the donut spare tire is. Thankfully, there is a spare tire in this car. Now, as we climb on in the rear seat, you'll be extremely impressed by how much space is back here. I'm 5'9" and I am lounging back here. This is the size of room that I would expect in a Sienna. I have so much headroom. I have a hand height of headroom in here. I have so much legroom. I can fit my feet under the seat if I was really tall and big. There's 2 bag holders on the backs of each seat, so you won't find a map pocket holder. They actually make you bring your own bag in this car. There aren't many amenities back here besides the mandatory seat belts. There's also no cup holders in the doors. But to wrap things up, the back seat of this is actually bigger than you think. We are just about almost ready to experience the 108 horsepower of the Scion XB. In order to do that though, here's the key fob for the XB in Toyota fashion. You can see the key, a Toyota key with the Scion logo on it, and also the Toyota-esque key fob as well. But since this is a normal car with no push button start or nonsense like that, we can put, or you don't even have to put your foot on the brake. You can just insert the key into the ignition and twist. And you can hear that little Toyota sound. So welcome to the interior of this little 1.5 liter dual overhead cam box. It is simple, but it's kind of refreshing, unlike all the screens and piano black plastic that we see nowadays in cars. Very simple. You do have a radio. This one is an aftermarket radio that has Apple CarPlay and Android Auto, but normally you would have a CD player, a radio with AM and FM, and of course a tape deck. And I believe the CD player was optional in this car. The climate controls are also extremely simple as well. It's single zone, all manual controls. Everything is nicely labeled And since it's single zone, it's so simple. The steering wheel is also very simple in this. It's 3-spoked, and this one has a steering wheel cover on it, but it's a vinyl material otherwise. There's no buttons on the wheel, and this doesn't even seem to have cruise control to my knowledge, but we can listen to the horn. Actually a loud sounding meep meep horn, so that's good. You can get people out of your way. Behind the steering wheel, you'll see that the headlights are not automatic, but the wipers are intermittent. Not automatic though. The rest of the interior is extremely simple as well. The gauges are all in one little pod, one circle up here like a motorcycle, so you have the speedometer, tachometer, and fuel gauge all in one. There's no coolant gauge, it's just a light that either is blue when the engine is cold or red when the engine is too hot. Of course, there are some other warning lights as well, and there is a tiny trip meter which you can keep track on your MPGs and things like that. I'll be honest, I was surprised to see that this has traction control. At this time, traction control wasn't standard in every car, it was optional, and sometimes not even available in some cars. Thankfully, this does have the typical amenities like power windows, mirrors, and locks, so you're not extremely bare bones in this. There's also a lot of places to hide things in here. There's this little storage compartment underneath the climate controls, which you can fit a little bit of stuff. And there's also a compartment above the glove box, which you can put a piece of toast here. Karna also wanted me to mention that this XB has been signed by one of his favorite music artists, Grayson Chance. If anyone knows that, it's a little Easter egg for you. There's 2 cup holders by the shifter, but that's it. There's nothing else. This does have an ashtray with a cigarette lighter, but it's actually never been used, and the ashtray, just like in my own cars, is a coin holder in this case. For being an economy car, the seats are actually pretty comfortable. They offer more support than I would expect. They're pretty soft and comfortable. Of course, they're manual, no heated seats, no cooled seats, no power seats. This is all we need. It's a manually dimming rear view mirror. This has visors with just mirrors but no lights, and the visors aren't even like hard like in a Camry. These are cheaper than the Camry. It feels like cardboard. That's funny. This one also has the JBL audio system that Toyota put as standard equipment in these younger people based models, and it actually does sound pretty good, especially because this has an aftermarket head unit in it. But again, this interior is really simple, so I think it is about time to drive this, and you'll notice that the driving experience is pretty simple as well. So welcome to the Scion XB driving experience. This has been a pretty interesting experience, I will say, because I've never driven the XB and I've never driven a little boxy car like this before. And it's actually been kind of fun to drive, even though it is very slow. We will be getting on the power here, but in order to make sure I have all 105 horsepower, I will turn the AC off. We can see now. Now it's not fast, it's not even quick, but it does move and it gets out of its own way. Don't expect something speedy with this. Expect this to kind of drive like a Yaris, but bigger. And it does. It actually rides pretty nice, even though it's on pretty small tires and wheels. So it's actually a pleasant surprise to see that. It doesn't feel like a complete junker, which is nice. I'll turn the AC back on. It does rattle throughout the not the interior, but things do rattle a little bit in here. Not a lot. I've heard some interiors really make some noise, but this isn't bad. It's a perfect commuter car. It really is not about speed and power with this car, but the visibility is great because it is a big box. There's big windows everywhere. Thankfully, the mirrors aren't that small. The rear window is easy to see out of. It's a great car to learn how to drive. And I know many people that have had these as their first car. Oh, okay, I have front of line. Full throttle. $60. So yeah, it takes time. it takes some time to get up to speed. And at high speeds, I mean, I'm doing 60 right now, and thankfully it doesn't feel scary. It does feel like I'm driving a small old Toyota. If you're used to that, they still have a substantial feeling on the road. Like, the steering is still fairly tight. The suspension is pretty good. There's no clunks in the suspension. But because this is a 4-speed auto, I'm doing about 60 right now, and I'm at 2,900 RPM, which isn't terrible. Wind noise also isn't as bad as some other cars that are more expensive than this. Of course, when you take some bumps, it might not feel as, you know, secure and solid just because it is a smaller car, but it's actually a nice driving experience, I'd say. I have the AC off, but we can see how this little city car turning circle is. Not bad. And then I'm not flooring it just because, like, why? Well, you don't need to. You'll eventually get to 60, like right now, and it's fine. I mean, it is slow, but the powertrain doesn't ask of you to drive it aggressively. It's not a sporty car by nature. This is an economy car, and it certainly does feel like it, but it's not the type of car that I'd feel embarrassed to be seen in, even though it is weird looking. I like it. We can see acceleration with AC on. Of course, it's not going to be drastically different, but AC in these little cars does zap power. Oh yeah. You know, I'm not pushing the car either. Thankfully though, it does have air conditioning, and on a like 90-degree day like today, it's nice. We can see how it does around here. Like, it takes corners pretty well, but of course it's not sporty, and I didn't throw it into this corner. On this rougher road, you definitely hear the interior, and more, I think it's the windows and maybe the door cards that make some random noises, but it's not terribly loud. It does take bumps. I mean, like, it took those bumps pretty well. I kind of expected it to not do that, but it doesn't bottom out at bumps. You have a nice feel of the road, thankfully, and throttle response is good because this is a mechanical throttle. The steering is hydraulic, so it's actually pretty nice to drive. It's not too light and effortless how these new economy cars feel. Around this corner here, it's not sporty. The steering, the rack is kind of slow, but it's made for, you know, just to make driving more effortless, you know? So it's okay. I'm not really discrediting this at not being sporty to drive. It'll take every corner that you want to take, and it's not scary to drive either, so that's a big plus. And like, if you need to hustle it, like, do not. Like, first, you're not gonna have any power to hustle this in traffic. You just have to accept reality that you'll be doing 40. It's a nice little car to drive. I appreciate the XB a little bit more now. And now, my friends, this wraps up our time with the popular Scion before the FRS. This is a darling little car. Of course, it's not gonna have much wow factor compared to some other cars on the market, but because it's a small box that's actually very roomy inside, dead reliable, cheap on gas. So I really do see why people like these. They're not up to my speed necessarily. I hope you all enjoyed learning about this little toaster today as much as I did. Remember to hit that notification bell because sometimes YouTube isn't quite the best at pumping out notifications. But again, thank you all for stopping by, and I'll see you guys in the next video. Bye, peeps.